The checkout line at Garfield's supermarket moved the way everything in Clara Simmons's life moved lately. Slowly, indifferently, without any regard for how much it was costing her, just to stand there. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late November, the kind of cold that seeps through a coat, no matter how tightly you pull it. And Clara had exactly $41 in her wallet. She had counted it 3 times already in the parking lot, sitting in her 2009 Honda Civic with the heat broken, and her 7-year-old daughter Maisie asleep in the back seat. With a fever that had been climbing since Sunday night, the $41 had to cover Maisie's prescription, a gallon of milk, and if anything was left, anything at all, maybe a box of the macaroni Maisie liked with the little star shapes. Clara was 34 years old. She had a degree in accounting that currently sat in a box in the storage unit she rented for $60 a month. Because her apartment didn't have room for boxes. She had worked for a mid-sized logistics firm in Cincinnati for 6 years before the layoffs in March, and she had applied to 112 jobs since then. She knew the number because she kept a spreadsheet. Because that's what accountants do, they track things, even their own failures. She had 2 interviews, neither called back. What Clara also had was Maisie. Maisie with the gap-toothed smile and the inexhaustible opinions about which cartoon animals were smarter than other cartoon animals. Maisie who had started 1st grade in September, and cried only on the first day, and not one day after that, because Maisie was, in Clara's completely objective assessment, the bravest person she had ever met. Maisie's father had left when Maisie was 18 months old, not dramatically, not with shouting or slamming doors, but quietly, the way a tide goes out, until one morning Clara realized the shore had been empty for a long time, and she just hadn't noticed. He sent money sometimes. Irregularly. Not enough to count on. Clara had left Maisie in the car, with the windows cracked and the doors locked, and a promise to be back in 8 minutes. She'd done the math in the parking lot. Milk was $3.49, the antibiotic prescription was $28 with a GoodRx coupon she'd found online at 2 in the morning. That left roughly $9 for the macaroni, and maybe a can of soup. She had a plan. She always had a plan. Plans were what you made when you had nothing else left to hold on to. The pharmacy counter was at the back of the store, past the deli and the floral section, with its buckets of carnations and its little refrigerated roses that cost $14 each, which Clara noted with the specific bitterness of someone who had not received flowers from anyone in a very long time. She handed the pharmacist her insurance card first, out of habit, even though she knew what he was going to say. This coverage terminated in September, the pharmacist said. He was young, maybe 23, with the apologetic expression of someone delivering news he hadn't personally caused but still felt responsible for. I can run the GoodRx if you have it. I do, Clara said, and slid the printed coupon across the counter. He typed for a moment. That brings it to $28.40. $28.40. She had planned for 28. The 40 cents felt enormous in the way that only people who have counted every dollar understand. Not because 40 cents would break anything, but because it meant her plan was already off by 40 cents, and plans that were off by 40 cents had a way of unraveling into something much larger by the time you got to the register. That's fine, she said. She paid for the prescription, tucked the white paper bag under her arm, and walked to the grocery section. She found the milk, she found the macaroni, the star-shaped kind, 89, which she had not actually confirmed in advance and which was, she now saw, $1.89, and not the $1.49 she had assumed. She put the soup back. She stood in the canned goods aisle for a moment doing arithmetic in her head, and then she walked to the register. The line had 4 people in it. Clara stood at the back and tried not to look at the magazine rack. Because the magazine rack always had headlines about the economy. And the economy was not something she could afford to have feelings about. In a supermarket checkout line on a Tuesday, the woman in front of her was buying approximately $150 worth of groceries, including 2 rotisserie chickens, and a cheese that came in a wooden box. Clara watched the total climb on the small screen and felt something in her chest that wasn't quite envy but was its close neighbor. When it was finally Clara's turn, she set the milk and the macaroni on the belt. The cashier scanned them without looking up. $7.38. Clara opened her wallet. She counted out a 5 2-1s and then reached for the coins in the small zipper pocket and stopped. She had spent the last of her change on parking. She looked at the screen. 7.38. She had $7 in bills. She was 38 cents short. It was 38 cents. It was also not 38 cents. It was the end of a very long 8 months of being 38 cents short of whatever the next thing was. And Clara felt the familiar pressure behind her eyes that she had become expert at suppressing because she had learned that crying in front of Maisie made Maisie scared and crying in front of strangers made them uncomfortable, and there was really no appropriate venue for the kind of crying Clara needed to do, so most she didn't. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I think I'm a little short. Can I put the mac and cheese back?" The cashier, a teenager with tired eyes and a name tag that said Bree, looked at the screen, then at Clara, then at the macaroni box with its cartoon stars. "Yeah, I can void it." "Actually," said a voice from behind her, "don't." Clara turned around. The man standing behind her in line was maybe 40, 42, with a dark green jacket, and the look of someone who had driven a long way and hadn't slept enough. He was holding a hand basket with a box of cereal, a bottle of orange juice, and what appeared to be a singular sad container of Greek yogurt. Standing beside him, half hidden behind his leg, was a small boy of about 9 with enormous brown eyes and a knit hat that had a dinosaur on it. "I've got the difference," the man said. He was already reaching into his jacket pocket. "No, please," Clara said immediately. "That's not. I'm fine. I can just put it back. It's 38 cents. He said it without condescension, without the particular performance of generosity that makes the recipient feel worse than the problem itself. He said it the way you'd say it's raining, as plain fact. He set 2 quarters on the belt next to the macaroni box. "Keep the change for next time." Clara looked at the 2 quarters. She looked at this man, who was watching her with steady, unremarkable kindness, not making a thing of it. "Thank you," she managed. The words came out smaller than she intended. Bree voided the void, rescanned the macaroni, and handed Clara her receipt. Clara gathered her bag and moved to the side to put her wallet away, and she was almost to the door, when she heard the small boy's voice. Clear and direct the way only children's voices are. "Dad, why was that lady sad?" And she heard the man say gently, "She was having a hard day, bud. Everybody has them sometimes. Did we help?" A pause. "I think maybe a little." Clara pushed through the glass doors into the cold. She sat in her car for a moment before starting the engine. In the back seat, Maisie stirred and blinked at her with glassy fever eyes. "Did you get the stars?" Maisie asked. "I got the stars," Clarissa said. She drove home. She made the macaroni. She gave Maisie the first dose of antibiotics in a small cup, with a little apple juice so it wouldn't taste like medicine. And Maisie drank it and didn't complain. Because Maisie never complained. Which was its own kind of heartbreak. She put her daughter to bed at 7:30. And then sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and the dim overhead light, and her spreadsheet of each 112 rejected applications. And she added the one she had sent that morning. And then she sat there for a while not adding anything. She thought about the man with the dinosaur hat boy. She thought about the way he hadn't made it a moment. The way he just handled it and moved on. Like it was the most natural thing in the world to close a gap for a stranger. She thought about how, in 8 months of struggling, that was the first time anyone had done that. Not a program, not a form, not a voicemail from a caseworker. Just a person in a line, on a Tuesday. She closed the laptop, she went to bed, she did not sleep for a long time. What Clara did not know that night was that the man's name was Vincent Cruz, and he was having his own hard year. Vincent was 41, a former high school history teacher, who had spent 12 years trying to make 11th graders care about the Missouri Compromise. He had loved the job with a specific nerdy devotion that his colleagues found charming, and his ex-wife had found exhausting. His son's name was Emmett, and Emmett was the reason Vincent had moved back to Cincinnati, from Columbus 8 months ago, after the divorce. His ex-wife had taken a position in Portland. A good position. A position she had every right to take. And rather than fight a custody battle across 2 time zones, Vincent had packed everything that mattered into a moving truck, and driven it to a city he hadn't lived in since college. Because Emmett needed to stay in the school where he knew people, needed to stay in the neighborhood where his grandmother lived 3 blocks away. Needed, in short, to have at least one to stay the same, while everything else changed. Vincent was now substitute teaching, which paid less than he was willing to calculate too precisely, and doing SAT tutoring on weekends, and learning to cook actual meals, because Emmett had announced at age 7 that frozen dinners were, quote, giving him a vibe. A statement so unexpectedly sophisticated that Vincent had spent a week thinking about it, before concluding the kid was probably right. He had been substituting at Garfield Elementary that day, which was how he ended up at the supermarket at 4 in the afternoon instead of his usual time, and Emmett had a playdate that ended early because the other kid got a stomachache. And so Emmett was with him, wearing the dinosaur hat that he refused to leave the house without from October to March. Considering the hat a kind of non-negotiable autumn to spring relationship. Vincent had not planned to pay for a stranger's macaroni. He had just looked at the woman's face when she heard the total, And he recognized something in it that he had seen in his face in the bathroom mirror more times than he liked to admit. The look of someone doing very careful math and discovering again that the math doesn't quite work out. He didn't think about it. He just did it. That might have been the end of the story. A small moment between strangers that both of them carried quietly for a few days. And then filed away in the place where you keep things that were almost nothing and almost everything at the same time. Except that the following Saturday Emmett had his soccer practice at the community center 3 blocks from Clara's apartment. And Vincent sat in the bleachers with his coffee and his weekend tutoring notes, and when he went to the water fountain outside the gym afterward, he nearly walked directly into Clara Simmons. She recognized him first. He saw it happen, the flicker of something across her face, a moment of recalibration. "You're the quarters guy," she said. He laughed, which surprised him. "That's going to be my superhero name, the quarters guy. Your son, he's on the team? Number 11. The one who has yet to actually kick the ball toward the correct goal. My daughter's the one in the green sneakers, who keeps stopping to look at something on the ground. Rocks? Worms, mostly." They stood there for a moment in the fluorescent light of the community center hallway. 2 people who had arrived in the same city from different directions and had not expected to run into the same stranger twice, which is, of course, exactly when the universe tends to arrange these things. "I didn't say thank you properly," Clara said. "In the store. She paused. "It was a hard day. You said thank you." "I said it like a person who was about to cry in a supermarket." "I've done that," Vincent said. "Different supermarket, but same energy." She looked at him steadily, the way people look at you when they're deciding whether to believe something. "You teach?" "Sub right now. I'm a history teacher technically, but history teachers are apparently less urgently needed than, say, literally anyone else." "I'm an accountant," Clara said. "Technically. Also apparently less urgently needed. 113 applications say yes." He was quiet for a moment. Outside the gym, a whistle blew and small sneakered feet pounded the floor. "I know someone," he said slowly. "The way you say something you're not sure you should. My neighbor. She runs a small CPA firm, just her and 2 other people. She mentioned last month she was drowning in year-end stuff. I don't know if she's looking for anyone, but..." He pulled out his phone. "Can I give you her number?" "I can't promise anything." Clara looked at his phone. She had heard phrases like "I know someone" before and they had led, most of them, nowhere. But she had also learned, in the last 8 months, to take the small open doors because sometimes a small door led somewhere and a big closed door was still just a closed door. "Yes," she said. "Please." He found the contact, showed her the screen, and she typed the number into her own phone. "Her name's Roberta," Vincent said. "Tell her Vincent from the greenhouse sent you. She'll remember me because I once returned her Amazon package that got delivered to my porch by mistake. I am apparently very memorable for logistical acts." Clara almost smiled. It was the closest she'd come to smiling in a while, and it felt unfamiliar in the way that things feel when you haven't used them. She called Roberta Finch. The following Monday morning, standing in the parking lot of Maisie School after drop-off, because the apartment had bad cell reception near the windows, and she needed good cell reception for a phone call that might actually matter. Roberta Finch was 70 years old, had been running her own CPA firm for 32 years, had a voice like a woman who did not waste syllables, and said within the first 4 minutes of the conversation, "Can you come in Thursday? I don't have time for multiple interviews. If you know what you're doing, I'll know in an hour." Clara knew what she was doing. She had known what she was doing for 6 years before the layoffs, and had not stopped knowing just because no one was paying her for it. She drove to Roberta's office on Thursday morning in her 2009 Civic, with the heat still broken and her best blazer and the leather folder she'd carried to every interview for the past 8 months. She sat across from a woman with silver hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain and answered every question directly, without hedging, because Roberta Finch was not a person you hedged with. 45 minutes in, Roberta took off her glasses and set them on the desk. "What are you doing next Monday?" she said. Clara looked at her. "Starting here, I hope." Roberta almost smiled. Correct. It was not a large salary. It was not a corner office or a 401(n), or the logistics firm she'd had before. It was a desk in a 2-room office above a dry cleaner on Clifton Avenue. Working for a woman who expected precision and punctuality, and didn't particularly believe in small talk before 11 in the morning. It was also real. It was a number Clara could divide into rent and groceries and prescription co-pays, and come out on the other side with a small margin that she had not had in 8 months. A margin is not the same as security. But a margin is what you build from. She told Maisie that night. Maisie, who was fully recovered from her fever and currently conducting what she described as a science experiment involving a cup of water and 17 stacked pennies, looked up and said, "Are we gonna be okay now?" Clara sat on the kitchen floor next to her daughter and thought about how to answer that in a way that was honest and also true. "We're going to be better," she said. Which is the same direction as okay. Maisie considered this. "Can we get the stars again?" "Yes," Clara said. "We can always get the stars." A few weeks later, she ran into Vincent again at soccer pickup, which had become, without anyone officially designating it as such, a place where they sometimes talked while Emmett tried to teach Maisie the offside rule, and Maisie tried to show Emmett a particularly good worm. Clara told him about Roberta, about Monday, about the desk above the dry cleaner. "I told you I couldn't promise anything," he said. "You delivered anyway," she said. "That counts." He looked at his coffee cup for a moment. Outside, Emmett was now, against all odds, successfully explaining soccer rules to a 7-year-old, and Maisie was listening with the focused expression she reserved for things she had decided were worth understanding. "I've been on the other end of it enough times," Vincent said. "Someone in a parking lot who happened to know someone. A neighbor who didn't have to remember my name but did. You stop thinking it's random after a while. What do you think it is?" He shrugged, but not in a dismissive way. In the way of someone who has thought about something long enough to be comfortable not fully resolving it. "I think people are mostly just trying to close the gaps where they can. 38 cents here, a phone number there. Nobody saves anybody by themselves. You just hand things forward and hope somebody else is doing the same." Clara thought about that for a long time afterward. She thought about it at her desk above the dry cleaner, entering Q4 figures in spreadsheets while the smell of cleaning chemicals drifted up through the floor. She thought about it in February, when she overheard a woman in the pharmacy line saying she was $11 short on her daughter's inhaler. And Clara reached into her wallet, without thinking about it. The way you hand something forward before the moment can close. She thought about the woman's face, the flicker, the recalibration, and she recognized it completely. "It's okay," Clara said. "I've been there." The woman looked at her for a moment. "Thank you," she said, in a voice that was trying very hard to be steady. "I know," Clara said, and she did. She drove home through Cincinnati in the early dark of February. The heat in the Civic finally fixed. She'd had it done in January, the first non-essential expense she'd allowed herself. And Maisie asleep in the back seat, with her jacket bunched under her head like a pillow. And Clara thought about all the moments that had led from a supermarket checkout line to here. 2 quarters. A neighbor's name. A phone call in a cold parking lot. A desk above a dry cleaner that smelled like chemicals. And felt, improbably, like the beginning of something solid. None of it was a miracle. That was the part people sometimes got wrong about these stories. They wanted a miracle, a single enormous gesture that reversed everything in one moment. But that wasn't how it worked, at least not in Clara's experience. It was smaller than that, and more durable. It was a cashier who didn't make her feel small. It was a man who said 38 cents like it was nothing. It was a woman with silver hair who asked one question instead of 12, and then made up her mind. It was Emmett patiently explaining offsides. It was Maisie deciding a dinosaur hat boy was worth listening to. It was the particular, ordinary, radical act of one person seeing another person clearly enough to close the gap between them. Not because they had extra. Not because it was convenient, but because they had looked up from their own hard day long enough to notice someone else's. Clara Simmons had learned, in the longest year of her life, that this was how the world actually worked when it worked well. Not in grand gestures, in quarters. In phone numbers passed between strangers in the hallways of community centers. In star-shaped macaroni and a daughter who never stopped being brave, and a February evening when the heat finally ran warm all the way home.